The day their divorce became official, Clara collapsed. The silence inside the civil registry was unbearable. The room smelled of old paper and fresh ink, the kind of lifeless scent that belonged to paperwork, not the end of a marriage. Clara sat across from Daniel, separated by a cold wooden table and a stack of documents that carried the weight of 10 years together. She gripped the pen tightly, not because she doubted her decision, but because she refused to let her hands shake. Her signature was already there. Only Daniel's remained. He picked up the pen with the same calm precision that had always defined him. One smooth stroke. No hesitation. No emotion. Just like that. Their marriage was over. Neither of them cried. Neither of them apologized. There was no desperate attempt to fix what had already fallen apart. Only silence. Clara slowly gathered the documents and stood to leave. The moment she took her first step, a sharp wave of dizziness hit her. Her vision blurred. A piercing ring filled her ears. The floor seemed to disappear beneath her feet. Then everything went black. The sound of her body hitting the floor shattered the silence. Clara. Daniel reached her before anyone else. He dropped to his knees, lifting her carefully into his arms. Clara, look at me. No response. Her face had turned frighteningly pale. His heart slammed against his ribs. Call an ambulance, he shouted. Registry employees rushed toward them, but Daniel barely noticed. Everything around him faded into meaningless noise. Only Clara mattered. He held her hand the entire ride to the hospital, watching every breath she took, terrified each one might be her last. Hours earlier, he had signed the papers that ended their marriage. Now all he wanted was for her to open her eyes. The smell of antiseptic greeted Clara before she fully woke. She blinked slowly against the bright hospital lights. Her head felt heavy. Her body weak. Then she noticed someone sitting beside the bed. Daniel. His expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie hanging loose, and exhaustion was written across his face. He looked nothing like the composed businessman who had signed their divorce papers only hours earlier. For a brief second, neither of them spoke. The silence broke when the door opened. A doctor stepped inside carrying a medical file. Mrs. Davies? Clara nodded weakly. The fainting spell was caused by a sudden drop in blood pressure. She let out a small breath. I figured it was stress. The doctor offered a gentle smile. Stress certainly didn't help, but that's not the main reason. Clara frowned. What do you mean? The doctor glanced between her and Daniel before looking back at the file. Congratulations. You're approximately 3 months pregnant. Silence. Complete silence. Clara stared at him. The words didn't make sense. Pregnant? Her mind immediately searched for another explanation. There wasn't one. The exhaustion. The nausea. The dizziness. Every strange symptom suddenly fit together. She slowly lowered a trembling hand to her stomach. 3 months. Across the room, Daniel hadn't moved. He looked completely frozen. For the first time since she'd known him, the man who always had an answer looked utterly lost. His lips parted, but no words came out. Neither of them had imagined walking into the registry that morning as husband and wife. And walking out as divorced parents. The doctor quietly excused himself, leaving them alone. The silence returned. Only this time. It carried an entirely different weight. Clara swallowed hard and forced herself to speak. This doesn't change anything. Her voice sounded calm. Too calm. Daniel finally looked at her. It changes everything. She shook her head. We're still divorced. We are, he admitted quietly. But we're also going to have a child. Clara looked away. She couldn't allow herself to process both losses at once. Not today. Not now. I don't need you to do this. Daniel took one careful step closer. This isn't about us anymore. It's about our baby. The words hit harder than she expected. She crossed her arms instinctively, building a wall between them. I need time. Daniel didn't argue. He simply nodded. You can take all the time you need. He paused before adding softly. But whether you want me in your life or not, I'll always be in our child's. For a long moment, Clara said nothing. She didn't know what frightened her more. Raising a baby alone. Or discovering that a part of her still wanted to believe him. Daniel quietly left the room, giving Clara the space she had asked for. The door clicked shut. For the first time that day, she was alone. She rested a hand on her stomach, still struggling to believe the doctor's words. Pregnant. How had she not realized? The exhaustion. The nausea. The endless headaches. She had blamed everything on the divorce. Now every symptom finally made sense. But the news did more than change her future. It pulled her back into a past she had spent months trying to forget. Their story hadn't begun with heartbreak. It had begun in Paris. Clara had traveled there for an international design conference. Daniel was attending a series of business meetings. They met by pure accident inside a small cafe near the Seine after both reached for the last empty table. One conversation became dinner. Dinner became long walks beneath the city lights. Within days, it felt as though they had known each other for years. Daniel was confident without being arrogant. Focused, intelligent, endlessly ambitious. But when he looked at Clara, she felt like the only person in the room. For the first time in her life, falling in love felt effortless. When they returned home, the distance didn't last long. Phone calls turned into flights. Flights turned into weekends together. A year later, they were married. Everyone believed they were the perfect couple. For a while. They were. Then success changed everything. As Daniel's company expanded, so did the demands on his time. Business dinners replaced date nights. Board meetings replaced weekends together. His phone became a permanent part of his hand. At first, Clara told herself it was temporary. She supported him. Encouraged him. Waited for things to slow down. They never did. The loneliness arrived quietly. Not through betrayal. But through absence. Daniel was always providing for their future. He simply forgot to live in the present. Then came the control. Not obvious. Not cruel. Just subtle enough to seem reasonable. You don't have to work anymore. I'll take care of everything. Maybe skip that trip. I'd rather you stayed home. Individually, none of the requests seemed important. Together, they slowly erased pieces of her life. Her career became smaller. Her friendships faded. Her independence disappeared one compromise at a time. Whenever Clara tried to explain how trapped she felt, Daniel never truly heard her. I just want what's best for you. He believed it. That was the problem. He never stopped to ask what she wanted. Months turned into years. Conversations became arguments. Arguments became silence. Eventually, silence became their normal. The day Clara finally asked for a divorce, Daniel thought she was angry. The second time she brought it up, he thought she was emotional. The third time, he finally realized she meant every word. By then, it was already too late. Their marriage hadn't ended because they stopped loving each other. It ended because love had been buried beneath control, distance, and years of never truly listening. A soft knock pulled Clara back to the present. The hospital door opened. Daniel stepped inside, careful not to come too close. Neither of them spoke. After everything they had shared, words suddenly felt too small. For several long seconds, they simply looked at each other. Not as husband and wife. Not as strangers. But as two people whose lives had just become permanently connected again. Daniel finally broke the silence. I know you don't trust me. Clara didn't deny it. I don't know if I can. He nodded slowly. I understand. That answer caught her off guard. Months ago, Daniel would have defended himself. Explained. Argued. Today. He simply accepted her feelings. I can't change what I did, he said quietly. But I can change who I become. Clara studied his face. For the first time in a long time. She believed he actually meant it. She just wasn't ready to believe it would last. The weeks that followed settled into an uneasy routine. Neither Clara nor Daniel knew what they were becoming. They weren't husband and wife anymore. They weren't friends. But they were about to become parents. And that changed everything. Daniel kept his promise. He never pushed. He never demanded. He simply showed up. Every doctor's appointment. Every ultrasound. Every late-night phone call when Clara wasn't feeling well. If she needed groceries, they appeared at her door. If she forgot a prescription, Daniel had already picked it up. He never asked for credit. He never expected gratitude. He was simply there. At first, Clara kept her guard up. She thanked him politely. Nothing more. But over time, she stopped questioning whether he would show up. Because he always did. Trust wasn't rebuilt through promises. It was rebuilt through consistency. Little by little, the walls around her heart became harder to maintain. One afternoon, after another routine checkup, Clara stepped out of the clinic with a small smile. Everything looked good. The baby was healthy. For the first time in weeks, she allowed herself to breathe. Across the street, Daniel was waiting beside his car. The moment she saw him, she noticed something was wrong. His posture was rigid. His jaw clenched. His expression unreadable. As soon as she reached him, he asked quietly. Were you with Edward? She frowned. What? I saw him leaving the building. Understanding flashed across her face. Edward. An old coworker. A longtime friend. Nothing more. I ran into him in the lobby, Clara explained calmly. We talked for a minute. That's all. Daniel looked away, trying to control the jealousy rising inside him. He had promised himself he wouldn't become that man again. But hearing Edward's name had awakened every insecurity he thought he'd buried. You could have told me. Clara's expression hardened. Do I have to report every conversation I have now? No. But I wish you'd been honest. I am being honest. Silence stretched between them. Daniel knew he should let it go. Instead, he made the same mistake that had destroyed their marriage. He's always been interested in you. Clara stared at him. You really haven't learned anything. That's not what I meant. It doesn't matter what you meant. It matters what you said. She folded her arms across her chest. I spent years trying to convince you that not every man wanted something from me. His heart sank. She was right. Again. He had slipped back into the same old habit. Control disguised as concern. Daniel closed his eyes for a second. When he spoke again, his voice was completely different. I'm sorry. Clara blinked. He had apologized before. Usually followed by an explanation. Or an excuse. This time. There was neither. I was jealous, he admitted. And that's my problem, not yours. She studied him carefully. He wasn't defending himself. He wasn't shifting the blame. For the first time. He was taking full responsibility. I don't want to become the man who lost you twice. The words landed harder than either of them expected. Clara looked away, blinking back unexpected emotion. She wanted to stay angry. It would have been easier. Instead, she saw a man fighting against the worst parts of himself. And that battle looked painfully real. I still need space, she whispered. Daniel nodded immediately. I know. And I'm going to respect that. No arguments. No persuasion. No desperate promises. Just acceptance. For Clara. That was new. Over the following months, something quietly changed between them. They still weren't together. But they laughed again. Sometimes during doctor's appointments. Sometimes while arguing over baby names. Sometimes over nothing at all. The conversations became easier. The silence became comfortable. One evening, after another appointment, Clara handed Daniel a folded ultrasound picture. He looked at it in surprise. I thought you should have one too. For several seconds, he simply stared at the tiny image. Then his eyes filled with emotion. It was the first picture of his son. And the first gift Clara had willingly given him since the divorce. He looked up. Thank you. She smiled. Only for a second. But Daniel noticed. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But for the first time. Hope didn't feel impossible. A few weeks later. Daniel stopped by Clara's apartment as he usually did. No answer. He knocked again. Still nothing. Just as he reached for his phone, an elderly neighbor stepped outside. Looking for Clara? Daniel nodded. She left yesterday. His stomach tightened. Left? She said she needed some time away. Rented the apartment for a while. Did she say where she was going? The neighbor shook his head. No. Daniel stood there, staring at the closed door. For the first time since the divorce. She had disappeared without telling him. He couldn't blame her. After what happened with Edward, she had every reason to walk away. All he could do now was wait. And hope she would come back. Days turned into weeks. Daniel never stopped checking his phone. Every unknown number made his heart race. Every unanswered message reminded him how fragile trust really was. Then one night. His phone rang. The caller ID read. City Hospital. His blood ran cold. Mr. Davies? Yes. You need to come immediately. It's Clara. Nothing else mattered. Daniel barely remembered the drive. He only remembered praying. Over and over. Please let her be okay. Please. When he reached the hospital, a doctor met him outside the operating room. Mrs. Davies suffered a premature placental abruption. Daniel stared blankly. We're taking her into emergency surgery. His legs almost gave out. Will they be okay? The doctor's expression said everything before he spoke. We're doing everything we can. A long silence followed. Then came the question Daniel never imagined hearing. If complications become critical, we may have to prioritize either the mother or the baby. Daniel felt the world stop. Every instinct screamed for Clara. Every memory reminded him how much she already loved their unborn son. He closed his eyes. He remembered the night she'd whispered to their baby while she thought he was asleep. I'll protect you. No matter what. Daniel opened his eyes. His voice trembled. If that choice has to be made. Save our son. The doctor nodded once before rushing back into surgery. Daniel collapsed into the nearest chair. For the first time in his life. There was nothing to fix. Nothing to negotiate. Nothing money could solve. All he could do was wait. Hours later. The operating room doors finally opened. Daniel jumped to his feet. The doctor removed his mask and smiled. They're both alive. Daniel's knees nearly gave out. Relief hit him so hard he couldn't speak. A nurse soon wheeled Clara into recovery. She looked exhausted. Pale. Weak. But alive. When their eyes met. She whispered. You chose the baby. Daniel stepped closer. I chose what I knew you would have chosen. Tears filled Clara's eyes. Not because of the pain. Not because of the surgery. But because, for the first time, Daniel had loved her without trying to control the outcome. He had finally understood the difference between loving someone and possessing them. She reached for his hand. This time, she didn't let go. Their son arrived earlier than expected. Small. Fragile. Beautiful. They named him Leo. Watching Daniel hold his son for the first time changed something inside Clara. There was no businessman. No control. No pride. Only a father completely in love with his child. The weeks that followed weren't perfect. Healing never is. But Daniel never rushed her. He didn't ask for another chance. He simply earned it. One quiet day at a time. He brought groceries. Made coffee before leaving for work. Rocked Leo to sleep during long nights. Sometimes they barely spoke. Sometimes silence said everything. And slowly, the walls Clara had spent years building began to disappear. One rainy evening, Daniel stood by the front door, ready to leave after putting Leo to sleep. Outside, thunder echoed across the sky. Clara watched the rain for a long moment. Then she spoke. "Stay." Daniel looked at her, unsure he'd heard correctly. She smiled. Not the polite smile she'd worn for months. A real one. The kind he'd fallen in love with years ago in Paris. He walked toward her slowly. Neither of them rushed. Neither of them needed words. When their lips finally met, it wasn't a kiss born from loneliness. Or guilt. Or fear. It was a choice. A new beginning built on respect instead of control. On trust instead of promises. On love. Finally understood. Sometimes losing everything is the only way to learn what truly matters. Before you go, let me ask you something. If you were Clara, would you have given Daniel a second chance after everything they went through? Share your answer in the comments. I read as many as I can, and I'd love to hear your thoughts. If this story touched your heart, please take a second to like this video. It really helps the channel reach more people who enjoy emotional stories like this. And if you love powerful romance, billionaire dramas, and unforgettable endings, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our next story. Finally, share this video with someone who believes that real love is built on trust, forgiveness, and second chances. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next story.